Life's like a journey, a tightrope walking with blinded eyes. Who will I take with me? Who will give
Hello
me
and welcome to
some
this week's episode of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Firstly, a big thank you to everybody that watched last week's episode of the show, and a big thank you for your continuing support throughout the entirety of last year. Obviously, without you guys sort of watching and commenting and all that, there'd be no real point in having a show. So it's really nice that that you continue to support the channel. So. This year, 2023, I thought it would be really nice to kick off the new year with a brand new distillery. So as you can see, today's episode of the show is about the new Lagg Distillery on Arran. So firstly, a big thank you to Mariella, the brand ambassador for both Lacranza and Lagg, for the samples for today's episode of the show. Very much appreciated. So Arran, I mean, back when I entered the whiskey world, I suppose, for want of a better word, turn of the millennium, Arran, or the Lacranza distillery itself, had only been in production for 5 years, and it was the new kid on the block, and it was making lots of noise, but it was because it was sort of like the first new distillery in God knows how long. It was kind of everybody was really interested in what the distillery was doing. Obviously now we're 20 odd years down the line, Arran has sort of established itself as a lovely distillery, producing some beautiful whiskey, loved by lots and lots of people, here we are, sort of 2023, and a new distillery has emerged on the island. As far as I'm aware, originally the plans were to basically just expand the warehousing capacity for the Lacranza distillery, and but this piece of land was purchased, I believe, I think it's the south side of the island, well, obviously, quite a distance away from the actual distillery. So they obviously must have thought at some point, oh, why don't we just build a new distillery? As you do, we've just got sort of £10 million burning a hole in our pockets, because we've been so successful. Let's just build a new distillery. Why not? So yes, that's exactly what happened in 2017. Work commenced on the building of the distillery, and I have to say, looking at the pictures of the distillery, it is a stunning modernist building, it has to be said. Now, and it takes a lot for me to say that about modernist building. I mean, I watch Grand Designs. I love watching that program, and but I find all these sort of modernist cuboid buildings, larch clad, bloody bare concrete walls, just kind of leave me really cold. I mean, I'm kind of a traditional person. I love traditional architecture. I love sort of Victorian buildings and all the fancy bits, and all that kind of stuff. That's the sort of stuff that I like. But I have to say that the builders or the sort of designers, Denham Ben, have done just a stunning job, and it was shortlisted for the 2020 Scottish Design Awards. I don't think it actually won it, but just being shortlisted is quite a feat. And I just love the roof. I love the sort of triangular shaped sort of roof. It kind of looks very much like the sort of mountains, or sort of like undulating landscape, and it is a stunning distillery. It's not a huge distillery. I didn't make a note of what the current output of the distillery is, but it has obviously two stills. One 10,000 litre bulbous onion shaped still, so really big, not a huge amount of copper contact. Smaller spirit still, sort of lamp glass with a sort of pinched waste to obviously sort of get the reflux in, shell and tube condensers, and a wort fermentation of 72 hours, so not hugely long. So we can see that they're going for a more traditional sort of obviously barley centric style of wort. We're not going for sort of outrightly fruity and juicy like the sort of Arran new make. So it's going to be interesting to see where this is at sort of 3 years of age, because if you're going for the slightly more traditional style of spirit, it's obviously going to need more, a reasonable length of time in the cask. Obviously, as you can see from the samples I have in front of me, I have a sample of the new make which was made commercially available, so it's going to give us a nice insight into the DNA. And as you well know, I always love to taste new make, and I suggest, if that I always say to customers that try new make, but it's not maybe something you'd want to drink all of the time, but it gives you the kind of like the bare bones, should we say, of the style of the spirit before anything else gets in the way of that. So yes, so that's a little bit, not an awful lot to say really about the history of the distillery. It was built, it started, and it's released its inaugural releases. And of course, its inaugural releases were not just one, but 3 batches. Why not? If you're going to go for it, you might as well go for it, I suppose. So, yeah, not an awful lot to say apart from, let's just take a look at today's one. Okay, so we're going to kick off with the new make. So this is obviously not your sort of like cut to 50% sort of nice and approachable new make. This is the real McCoy. This is 63.5%, which is pretty much close to sort of filling strength. I believe filling strength is 68.8. So the code on this particular bottling is L180419. It was bottled in April of 2019, so it's been around for a while, but and I have been imbibing it from time to time, as to be said. So, and then we're going to move on to the 3 brand new bottlings that came out October, November, I think it was. So yeah. Inaugural release number 1. It's, as I should have said, that they use concerto barley peated to 50 parts per million. Now I believe that the whole idea of the distillery is to be a bit more experimental with regards to sort of peat. I believe that they're going to be using peat from all over the world, not just Scotland, and going to be playing around with that, so it's going to be interesting to see. It's obviously not going to sort of have a specific peat style if they're going to be looking at sort of the terroir of peat to a certain extent, which is going to be really cool. I mean, this is the in thing at the moment. It's all about the terroir, so we, terroir of barley and things like that. We've obviously got distilleries like the Israeli distillery, Milk and Honey, looking at sort of maturation in different climates or climatic zones. And now we've got Lagg, who are probably going to start looking at sort of different styles of peat from different types of bogs, probably from different depths. Oh wow, there's just got so much scope. It's not just decomposed matter. Anyway, so the inaugural release is 100% ex-bourbon casks and is 36 months old. Batch number 2, again same barley, same ppm, first fill ex-bourbon casks for 30 months, but finished in 55 litre ex-Oloroso for 6 months, and it's picked up quite a considerable amount of colour, as you can probably see, in just 6 months in those small sherry casks. And batch number 3, again same barley, same ppm, first fill bourbon for 30 months, and again 6 months finishing in ex-Rioja casks. Now that I would have expected to be a lot of a darker colour, but obviously not. It's got a little bit of a red hue to it, but not a great deal. And then you're probably wondering what this is. Well, when the little package of samples came from Mariella, she kindly sent me this little box with some chocolate in. This is not any old chocolate though. It is chocolate made with some Lagg new make, and has been made by a company called James of Arran, or the Arran Chocolate Factory Limited, I believe. Now, it doesn't seem to be available on the James of Arran website or the Lagg website, so I'm guessing that they're probably only available to purchase at the distillery itself. So, you know, not only is you can obviously visit the distillery on Arran and purchase the whiskey, you can also purchase the chocolates. And well, I thought, well, as Mariella had kindly sent me the chocolates, I'd review them. Why not? I must admit, I'm not sort of a chocolate connoisseur, shall we say, but I do like my good quality chocolates. So yeah, why not? Be a bit different. It is the first episode of the year, isn't it? So, but anyway, before we get to said chocolates, we're going to kick off with a little bit of music. Right, okay, so let's start with the Lagg Peated Spirit Drink and 63.5%. Let's see what the nose gives us. Right, well, the first thing that's really evident, it's really clean. We're not talking oily, well, a little bit of oiliness, a little bit of off the still, but I mean, we're talking sort of marginal amounts. It's got a sweetness, a barleyed sweetness, as I was expecting, and the peat is really quite dry. It's quite dry, it's sooty, earthy, there's no medicinal notes. Yeah, it's really sooty, but that barleyed note is beautifully sweet, and that's a lovely nose. That is gorgeous, and this is obviously, here we are setting out the style of the spirit, and it's obviously why they bottled it at 3 years of age. It's got this lovely cleanliness, this real purity, and with it not being overly fainty, it's not going to require sort of, you know, 10 years in the cask to sort of remove those sulphur compounds, which is why they've obviously bottled it at 36 months, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how this develops over time. Anyway, let's see what the power's like. For 63%, it's not ripping my throat out. Yes, you can taste that it is a high ABV, and it is masking the finish again, but it's pretty much as the nose suggests. Sweet barley, earthy, sooty peat, a little bit of salinity, good length for new make. I mean, so if this is the new make that's drinking really, really nicely, practically straight off the still, it's, you know, not a surprise, like I said, that they've decided to release it at 36 months of age. Let's put a little drop of water with it and see what that does to it. Okay, that has made it a little bit more oily, but it's brought out some lovely lemon, almost kind of lemon verbena, that sort of slightly oily, lemony kind of note. Still quite sweet, bit more salty now. Maybe a little less of the peat. The peat does seem to have dropped off a smidge, but it's still there, still quite sooty and sort of earthy. Let's see what the power's like. Oh, that's chewy, juicy, bit more malty now. A little bit fuller again, good amount of peat still there, nice and earthy and dry, bit more saltiness, still got that pleasant sort of, not quite so sweet barley, it's maybe a little bit more drifted towards the sort of gristier end of the barley kind of flavour spectrum as opposed to the sweeter end. Nice pepperiness on the finish now. Really, really good new make. That is going to sort of be absolutely stunning with a little bit of time in the wood, and well, we're now going to find out. Right, okay, so let's move on to the inaugural release, batch number 1, 100% American oak. Oak is quite noticeable. It's quite creamy, vanilla-y, a little bit woody possibly, but the saltiness, that dry peat is coming through quite nicely. Nice saltiness, almost kind of mineral salinity. Touch of lime, which is what I got from the new make once I put a little bit of water with it, and obviously this is cut to 50%, but It's absolutely gorgeous. Lovely, lovely nose. Getting a bit manure-y now with the as it's opening up. But again, like I said, the peat is more in that sort of earthy, drier, sootier kind of style, as opposed to the sort of more medicinal or sort of burnt woody kind of style of some of the other distilleries. But so distinct, unique, and you can't ask for anything more than that, can you? So that's right. That kicks off with that dry, sooty peat, a little bit of green pepper, vanilla, and it moves into this kind of almost kind of mescal-y kind of pulped, slightly astringent white fruits, salt. Again, that sort of almost sort of mineral salinity on the finish. Really coastal, really intense. I can almost feel the salt kind of, you know, encrusting my tongue. A little herbalness, and that dried peat kind of lingers. It really is a very impressive spirit, has to be said. The oak is not too intense. It's kind of there. It's kind of adding a little bit of vanilla. But it's interesting how the sort of spirit has maintained the sort of the dry, sooty character and that sort of lemoniness. But it's kind of now the white fruit starting to sort of like develop this kind of almost kind of pulped kind of character, which is quite intriguing. And so this is, you know, this is, like I said, only 36 months of age, and it is showing some lovely sort of integration with the oak. It's showing some you know, progression from the new make. So yeah, really interesting stuff. Okay, so let's move on to batch number 2. So this has had 6 months in ex Oloroso 55 litre casks. Let's see what the nose gives us on this end, shall we? Right, so the sherry is quite noticeable. It's not a sherry monster. It's moderate amount of sherry, I would guess. So, you know, you've got the sort of dried fruits, dried citrus peel. But there is some sweetness there, again, sweet barley coming through, a little bit less of the peat. I mean, I'm still picking up the dryness, the sootiness, but there's a slight sort of herbal, more of a herbal kind of intimation. It's obviously the way the peat is kind of reacting in with the sort of like the herbalness of the sherry, I guess. There's a little bit of a rose petal note, a little bit of a youthful spirit. Which is quite a surprise. Wasn't expecting that, considering that the 100% American oak didn't quite, the 100% bourbon batch 1 didn't exhibit that. But again, as we know, you stick it in the same type of cask, stick them next to each other, and they can, you know, mature at completely different rates. So it feels a little younger than the batch number 1. I must admit, as it settles down a bit, the sherry does kind of like sort of bottom out a little bit, and a little bit more of that sort of dried peat kind of comes through, which is quite nice. So yeah, let's see what it passes out. Juicy, earthy, sooty. Again, that sort of peat note has wrapped itself into the kind of like the herbal dried fruit, and it's kind of almost giving a medicinal kind of note. Not quite. Again, I can get that slight sort of agave kind of pulped fruit underneath it, the barley as well. The sherry is, although initially a bit of a hit, it does kind of like sort of taper off relatively quickly and allow the character of the spirit to come through. I like it more than I like the nose. It's got more exuberance, it's got more character. It's got a lovely progression, a lovely softness. Yeah, I think the palate is slightly more sort of expressive, and it works, I think, really quite nicely. Like I said, the progression is good. It starts with the sherry, moves into the spirit character. There's a little bit of a vanilla note on the finish coming from the American oak. Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's not too OTT on the sherry. Kind of more warming to the batch number one, it has to be said. But yeah, that's not bad bottling at all. Right, okay, moving on to batch number three. So 6 months in 50 litre ex Rioja casks. Let's see what those gives us on this end, shall we? Again, the finishing cask is relatively subtle. I'm getting sweet red fruits. Again, there's that slight herbal note. A little bit more earthy peat. I think the nose is a little bit better balanced than the sherry finish. I'm certainly getting, again, that sort of mescal-y kind of slightly astringent white fruit notes. A bit more malty, a bit more biscuity. I'm not quite getting the sort of rose petal-y kind of note from batch number two. And it doesn't quite have that sort of, although there is a little bit of a herbalness, it doesn't quite have that sort of almost medicinal notes. There's obviously the way the spirit is reacting with the sherry has kind of given it that slight medicinal characteristic. Because it's certainly not evident here. There is that, like I said, there's that slight sort of winey herbalness, but not that sort of like medicinal kind of note. That is a gorgeous nose. That works really, really well. I like that. Really well balanced. Let's do a pass one. Palate feels weightier, oilier, possibly more maltier. Again, subtle dried red fruits, a little herbal note, the dry earthy peat coming through. Again, the finishing cask kind of, no, I wouldn't say stops, but it kind of sort of peters out sort of some point on the mid palate, which then allows the spirit character to come through. So again, I'm getting that slight mescal-y kind of pulped white fruit. Salt, minerals, tobacco leaf. Again, the red fruit is kind of coming back on the aftertaste, or maybe it doesn't actually quite fully go away. Possibly. Again, I love the progression of that. It just works so well. It's definitely a toss-up between batch one and batch three. Sorry, here I am, sort of like going, love the pure element of the sort of the American oak, but the modernist bit is actually quite good. You know, it's kind of Anyway, all I can say is, good stuff. Right. Okay. So. Finally, we're on to the chocolate. Let's see what. Can't really. Yeah, I'm getting some nice dark chocolatey notes, dark cocoa-y notes. Can't say I'm picking up on any lag notes on the smell. So let's have a little bit of a taste. That's nice. Nice combination of dark and milk chocolate. I think it's a milk chocolate ganache. Very subtle spirit. It's all really blended in quite nicely in actual fact. Nice creaminess, but there's sort of like, you know, an element of the sort of slightly bitter dark chocolate right on the edge. I like that. That's really impressive, it has to be said. Really good quality chocolate. None of that sort of soapy sort of, you know, English chocolate kind of character, and that lovely purity. So if that's sort of indicative of the quality of the chocolate that the Arran chocolate factory are producing, then certainly worth taking a look at, I think. Yeah, that was really nice. Right, okay, so let's sum today's episode of the show. Firstly, again, a big thank you to Mariella for the samples and the chocolate for today's episode of the show. Certainly made it a different episode of the show, and yeah, really, really nice. So, the new make, absolutely gorgeous new make, lovely new make. Yeah, I mean, it just shows that how clean and sort of fresh and the character of the spirit is. It set itself out so that we knew exactly where we were going to go from then, with that sort of sooty, dusty peat, a little bit of citrus, and some lovely salty minerality. And that character was evident throughout all three of the bottlings. Loved the 100% American oak, really nicely balanced, augmented, I mean, a little bit heavy on the oak on the nose, but the palate I think was really nicely balanced. The sort of like the oak kind of like sort of drops off somewhere on the mid palate, and you get all that lovely sort of spirit character coming through. And pretty much the same could be said for, you know, batch number 2, the sherry cask. Maybe I wasn't quite so sort of blown away by the nose. The nose was okay. The sherry was, although I wouldn't say blanketing in its entirety, it certainly didn't have the exuberance that the palate had. But once in the mouth, I mean, again, it would kind of followed the same kind of pattern as the batch number 1, in that the sort of sherry sort of dropped off by about mid palate, spirit character coming through. Absolutely gorgeous. And batch number 3, again, like I said, I'm kind of torn between batch 1 and 3 as to which one that I actually preferred, but it really worked well with the Rioja finish. It just had that slightly subtle red fruits, a little bit more subtle than the sherry, and again, like the other two, kind of hit mid palate, oak kind of like drops off, spirit character continues, and just, you know, absolutely gorgeous. And the chocolate, well, yep, lovely chocolate. I like my good quality chocolate, and I can certainly say that is a good quality chocolate. Really nicely balanced again, you know, the sort of like the combination of the dark chocolate, the milk chocolate, and, you know, the subtle spirit character I thought was really, really nice. So I shall enjoy the rest of those while I'm editing today's episode of the show. So yeah, there you go. That's this week's episode of the show in the bag. I think it's been really, really interesting. I don't know whether any of these bottlings are still available, as they got gobbled up pretty quickly. It has to be said, but you know, if you got your hands on some and maybe can still do so, then I would certainly recommend doing so. If you can't, there's certainly plenty of the new make still knocking about. So anyway. Just like to wish you all a really happy new year, and I hope it's a great new year, and I hope you kind of stick around and watch the episodes of the show for this year, because there'll be a few more interesting ones cropping up from time to time. So anyway, until then, all I have to say is good afternoon and good dramming.